I still remember the exact words he used, the way they dripped with disdain as though every syllable was dipped in acid. 3 million? Pathetic. I don't even waste my time on proposals under 10. Don't embarrass yourself like this again. The how? CEO's voice echoed across the polished glass conference table, his lips curled into a smirk, his hands casually folded as if my entire life's work was nothing more than trash shoved across his desk. His board members laughed, not politely, not nervously, but cruelly. They laughed like hyenas circling a wounded animal. I sat there, frozen, a storm building behind my chest, my throat dry, my palms sweating against the folder that held the proposal I had spent sleepless nights preparing. I forced myself to swallow, to blink, to breathe. I thought the numbers clearly demonstrated market viability, I managed to say, my voice shaky but steady enough to sound human. The CEO leaned back in his chair, threw his hands up and said, "Viability? Kid, I've seen better ideas. Pitched by interns. 3 million won't even keep the lights on in my company for a week. You want me to take you seriously? Come back when you're playing in the big leagues. Until then, stick to lemonade stands." The room erupted again, the laughter louder, more brutal this time. And in that moment, sitting there under the fluorescent lights that suddenly felt more like interrogation lamps, I realized something. It wasn't just rejection. It was humiliation. It was the deliberate crushing of my spirit, designed to make me small, to remind me of my place in their world. I gathered my papers slowly, not because I was calm, but because my hands trembled, too violently to do it quickly. Every second felt like another dagger as their whispers chased me out of the room. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind kept replaying his voice. Pathetic. But to understand why this moment cut so deep, why it shattered, something inside me, you need to know where I came from. My name is Daniel Malik. I wasn't born into wealth, but I was born into ambition. My father worked as a mechanic in a rundown garage. My mother cleaned houses. From the outside, we were ordinary, blue-collar, paycheck to paycheck, but inside our home was a furnace of dreams. My father used to say, "Son, we may not have money, but we have ideas. And ideas can move mountains." He was right. I grew up sketching business models on scraps of paper, designing inventions from discarded wires, even pitching mock companies to my friends in the schoolyard. While other kids dreamed of being athletes or movie stars, I dreamed of building something that could outlast me. By the time I was 25, I had launched 2 small ventures. Both failed. One bled me dry, the other left me in debt. But failure never crushed me. It only sharpened me. I kept learning, adjusting, improving. My third idea was different. It was bold, disruptive, and backed by data I had meticulously gathered. I had crafted a proposal seeking $3 million in funding, a reasonable ask for scaling the technology. My pitch wasn't just numbers on a page, it was the manifestation of every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every ounce of belief I carried, and that's why his words, the CEO's sneer, the laughter of his board stabbed so deeply. It wasn't just about money. It was about my dignity, my worth, my father's voice echoing in my head telling me ideas can move mountains, only to have a powerful man grind that idea into the dirt and call it worthless. As if the humiliation in the boardroom wasn't enough. My own family wasn't exactly a source of comfort. When I told them about the rejection that night, my older sister, Nadia, didn't hesitate to twist the knife. "I told you," she said flatly, stirring sugar into her tea. "You're always chasing fantasies. 3 million? What kind of idiot thinks a billionaire CEO will waste time on you?" My mother scolded her. "Nadia, don't talk to your brother that way. He's trying." But Nadia only laughed. "Trying? He's wasting his life. If he had any sense, he'd settle down, get a real job, stop embarrassing us with these experiments." I clenched my fists under the table. I didn't say a word. I couldn't, because deep down, some part of me feared she might be right. But another part of me, the stronger part, refused to let her or that smug CEO be the final voice in my story. That night, long after my family had gone to bed, I sat alone in the dim kitchen with my laptop glowing against the silence. My proposal lay on the table, its pages crumpled from my grip earlier that day. I stared at the title page. Market Disruption Through Adaptive Energy Solutions. Pathetic. That word burned in my skull. But here's the thing about humiliation. Sometimes it destroys you. And sometimes it fuels you. As the clock ticked past midnight, I whispered to myself, if he thinks this is pathetic, let's see how he feels when his biggest rival signs it first. And that was the moment everything changed. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to turn my pain into power. I was going to sharpen my humiliation into the sharpest blade of revenge. And when the time came, that CEO, the man who laughed in my face, would choke on his own arrogance. But that's where the real story begins. The humiliation in that boardroom didn't end when I walked out. No. It followed me, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Word spread fast in the industry, faster than I could have imagined. I learned this the hard way a week later, when I tried to set up another meeting with a different investor. The assistant on the other end of the call lowered her voice as if embarrassed for me. Mr. Malik, I'm afraid Mr. Hendricks won't be taking this meeting. He heard about what happened with Mr. Crawford. Crawford? I asked, though I didn't need clarification. That was the CEO who called my proposal pathetic. Yes, she said carefully. Apparently he mentioned you at a dinner, said you were ambitious but misguided. She paused. And that your numbers were laughable. I stood there, phone pressed against my ear, my face burning as if the assistant could see the shame through the line. Thank you for letting me know, I muttered before hanging up. The ridicule spread further. People I once considered colleagues suddenly kept their distance. My inbox, once alive with replies, turned cold and empty. Every attempt I made to pitch the proposal was met with polite declines or, worse, silence. It wasn't just rejection. It was exile. And Crawford, that smug, arrogant CEO, was the one pulling the strings. One evening, I ran into an old friend, Marcus, at a networking event. He shook my hand, but I noticed his eyes darting away, scanning the room. Daniel, hey, he said with forced enthusiasm. Marcus, I greeted him, searching his face. It's been a while. Can we talk? I've been working on something big. His smile faltered. I heard. The energy proposal, right? Yes. $3 million in funding. Scalable, disruptive technology. You know it has legs. Marcus sighed. Look, between you and me, Crawford's been talking. He says you're out of your depth, that you don't understand scale. People listen to him, Daniel. He has influence. If he says you're not worth the time, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. His silence said it all. I left that event early, the weight of humiliation pressing harder than ever. At home, things weren't much better. Nadia took every chance to remind me of my failures. One night, after dinner, she leaned back in her chair and said with a smirk, So, Mr. Big Shot, how's your empire coming along? Any billionaires signed up yet? Enough, Nadia, my mother warned, but Nadia wouldn't stop. Honestly, I don't know why you bother. You're 30 and still chasing dreams like a teenager. Maybe Crawford was right. Maybe your ideas are pathetic. I slammed my hand on the table before I could stop myself. Don't you dare call my work pathetic. The room went silent. Nadia raised her eyebrows, smirking. Oh? Struck a nerve. Little brother? My father, who had been quietly sipping tea, finally spoke. His voice was steady but tired. Nadia, that's enough. And Daniel, control your temper. I wanted to scream, to shout that no one understood me, that I was fighting against giants while they sat in comfort. But instead, I clenched my jaw, swallowed the fire, and excused myself. Behind my closed door, I sat in the dark, whispering, the word over and over. Pathetic. 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 It echoed in my skull, but with every repetition, the word lost a little of its sting and turned into something else. A challenge. A dare. A warning. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Scrolling through social media, I saw a video clip from a tech conference. Crawford was on stage, microphone in hand, charming the audience with his usual arrogance. A journalist asked, "What's the worst pitch you've ever received?" Crawford chuckled. "Ah, that's an easy one. A young guy came to me with this so-called disruptive energy solution, asking for $3 million like it was pocket change. I told him straight, if you want to play in the big leagues, don't show up with little league money." Honestly, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The audience erupted in laughter. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur. He wasn't just rejecting me privately, he was mocking me publicly. That was when something inside me shifted. It was no longer about funding. It was no longer about validation. It was about vengeance. I spent nights at my desk, poring over research, adjusting numbers, perfecting every line of the proposal. Not because Crawford would ever see it again, but because I was preparing for the day I could put it in front of his greatest rival. Every sleepless night, every mocking word from my sister, every cold shoulder from so-called colleagues fueled me. I remembered my father's words, "Ideas can move mountains." And I thought to myself, then let's bury Crawford under one. What I didn't realize then was how far Crawford would go to crush me. A month later, I received an email from a potential client I had been nurturing for months. The message was short, almost apologetic. "Daniel, unfortunately, we've decided to terminate discussions. We were approached by Crawford Industries with a similar concept. We believe their scale makes them a better fit." I reread the email 3 times, my stomach sinking with each word. Crawford had stolen my idea, or at least pieces of it. Rage coursed through me. He hadn't just mocked me, he was now actively working to bury me, to strip me of any chance at success. That night, as the rain lashed against my window, I stared at my reflection in the glass and whispered, "This isn't over." Not by a long shot. At dinner that week, Nadia was relentless again. "So, Daniel," she said with false sweetness, "I heard Crawford's company is moving into adaptive energy solutions. Isn't that your idea?" My fork froze midair. "Where did you hear that?" "Everyone's talking about it. It's in the business news. Funny, isn't it? $1 billion company saw the potential. But you couldn't even get your foot in the door." She laughed, sipping her wine. "Maybe you should have asked for $100 instead of $3 million. That way, someone might have taken pity on you." My mother hissed, "Nadia, enough." But her laughter rang in my ears long after dinner ended. By then, the pattern was clear. Humiliation, rejection, betrayal, ridicule. Crawford was systematically poisoning my name in the industry while my own family sharpened their knives at home. I had 2 options: break under the weight of it all, or rise. I chose to rise. And in that decision, a plan began to take shape. One that would not only restore my dignity, but destroy Crawford's empire in the process. Because if there's one thing I learned from him, it's this: humiliation is a powerful weapon. But revenge is unstoppable. The weeks that followed felt like drowning in quicksand. The more I fought, the deeper I sank. Everywhere I turned, Crawford's shadow loomed. Articles praised his bold new venture into adaptive energy solutions. Journalists hailed him as a visionary. Investors lined up at his door, pouring millions into a project that was mine. Each headline cut me open like a blade. Crawford Industries to revolutionize energy efficiency. Crawford unveils disruptive technology, $1 billion idea. $1 billion idea. My idea. And yet, no one knew. No one knew that it was my sleepless nights, my bloodshot eyes, my endless calculations that birthed that proposal. I would, sit at my desk, staring at the glowing screen, fists clenched, whispering to myself, that should have been me. That was me. Friends I once trusted stopped answering my calls. They didn't want to be caught in my shadow, tainted by association. Even the ones who once encouraged me avoided my gaze at events. The industry, it seemed, had accepted Crawford's version of reality. And in their eyes, I was nothing more than a failed dreamer, a footnote in Crawford's success story. At home, my father tried to lift my spirits. He would pat my shoulder and say, "Son, mountains take time to climb. Don't let one man make you forget who you are." But Nadia? She reveled in every chance to twist the knife. One night, I walked into the living room to hear her on the phone. "Yes, Mr. Crawford, I understand," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "Of course. I'll make sure Daniel doesn't trouble you again. He's stubborn, but I'll keep him distracted." My heart stopped. I stood frozen, hidden by the doorway, listening as she laughed softly. "Yes, I'll tell him you wish him the best. Don't worry, he'll get over it eventually." She hung up, humming to herself as if she hadn't just stabbed me in the back. I stepped into the room, my voice low and trembling. You spoke to Crawford?" Nadia turned, startled for only a second before regaining her composure. "Oh, Daniel, don't look so shocked. I was just trying to save you from more embarrassment." "Embarrassment?" I hissed. "You're talking to the man who stole my idea and mocked me in front of the industry." She shrugged, unbothered. "Maybe because he knows how to execute, and you don't. Honestly, you should thank me for keeping peace. You'd only make a fool of yourself trying to fight him." Her words hit harder than any insult. It wasn't just doubt. It was betrayal. My own sister siding with the man who ruined me. I confronted my parents that night, my voice shaking, with anger. "Do you know Nadia is in contact with Crawford?" My mother's eyes widened. "What? No, surely not." But my father's silence told me he already suspected. Nadia walked in, arms crossed, smiling smugly. "What's the big deal?" "Crawford is successful, Daniel. He actually respects me enough to listen. Maybe you should have taken notes when you had the chance." I lunged forward, but my father stepped between us. "Enough!" he thundered. "This family will not tear itself apart over one man." But it already had. The damage was done. Days blurred into nights. I stopped attending events, stopped answering calls. Even my laptop gathered dust, as if mocking me for daring to dream. I would lie awake in bed, replaying every humiliation, every insult, every moment Crawford's laughter echoed in my skull. Night, I overheard Nadia whispering to a friend on the phone. "Honestly, I think Daniel's broken. Maybe he'll finally stop embarrassing us now." Broken. That word lingered, heavier than pathetic. I stared at the ceiling until tears blurred my vision. Was she right? Was I broken? As if fate hadn't tortured me enough, one morning the news broke. Crawford secures landmark contract with government, Adaptive Energy Solutions, to go nationwide. I nearly dropped the mug in my hand as I read the article. Nationwide. Billions of dollars. Contracts that would last decades. I stumbled into the kitchen, the paper shaking in my hands. Nadia snatched it from me, her eyes sparkling as she read. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Do you know what this means? Crawford is about to become untouchable, and you—" She looked at me with mock sympathy. "You'll always be the guy who pitched him a pathetic $3 million. Her laughter filled the room, piercing, endless. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I rushed out of the house, the world spinning around me. I found myself in the old garage where my father used to work. The air smelled of oil and rust, the walls stained with decades of sweat. I sat on the cold floor, my head in my hands, whispering, "Why? Why me?" I thought about giving up, selling everything, disappearing, becoming invisible. But then, through the haze of despair, I remembered my father's voice. Ideas can move mountains. I remembered Crawford's smirk. Pathetic. And I remembered Nadia's betrayal. Maybe he'll finally stop embarrassing us now. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I lifted my head, my tears drying into steel. "No," I whispered. "I'm not broken. Not yet." I looked around the garage, at the old tools, the grease-stained blueprints, the echoes of my father's work. This was where ambition was born. This was where dreams took root. And if Crawford thought he had buried me, he had underestimated one thing. I wasn't finished. I stood, fists clenched, chest burning with a new fire. They think I'm pathetic? Let's see how pathetic they look when I rise from the ashes. That night, I sat at my desk once more. I opened my laptop, the glow filling the dark room. For the first time in weeks, I typed. I restructured my proposal, sharpened every detail, refined every projection. But this time, I wasn't doing it for validation. I wasn't doing it for approval. I was doing it for revenge. Crawford had stolen my idea, mocked me, poisoned my name, and turned my own sister against me. But he had made one fatal mistake. He assumed I would stay down, I whispered. To myself, this isn't over, Crawford. You've won the first round, but I promise you, I will take everything from you. And as the words left my lips, I knew. The time for humiliation was over. The time for revenge had begun. When you've been dragged through the mud, mocked, and humiliated, you eventually face a choice: stay down or rise. That night, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop, I chose to rise. But I knew I couldn't do it recklessly. Crawford had power, influence, wealth, and an army of loyal followers. He had already poisoned the industry against me. If I wanted to beat him, I had to be smarter, quieter, patient. I had to play a game he didn't even know was being played. For weeks, I obsessed over everything related to Crawford Industries. Their press releases, their product launches, their financial statements. I devoured them all. I wasn't just looking for information. I was looking for weaknesses. Late one night, as I scanned through a 200-page government contract recently awarded to Crawford, I found my first thread. Hidden in the technical requirements was a clause about adaptive scalability, something my original design had solved elegantly, something Crawford had only half-baked. My heart raced. He had rushed to steal my idea, but in his arrogance, he hadn't fully understood it. That was his weakness. I began reaching out to old contacts, carefully, discreetly. Not investors this time, not colleagues who could betray me, but engineers, designers, builders, people who cared less about politics and more about creating. One of them, a quiet but brilliant programmer named Evelyn, agreed to meet me. We sat in a dim cafe, steam rising from our untouched coffee. Daniel, she said cautiously, I've heard the rumors. People say Crawford destroyed you. I clenched my jaw. He tried, but I'm not finished. Evelyn, I know you've been frustrated at Crawford's company. You've told me before, they cut corners, they rush projects, they silence ideas. Her eyes flickered. That's true. What if I told you I still have the original design? The one Crawford butchered. The one that actually works. She leaned forward, whispering, You mean the adaptive solution? I nodded. The real one, not his knockoff. I want to rebuild it stronger than ever, and when the time comes, we'll take it right out from under him. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. I'm in. And with that, the first piece of my revenge fell into place. We couldn't work in offices. Crawford had eyes everywhere. So we worked in secret, in the very same garage where my father had spent his life fixing engines. By day, it looked abandoned, just a dusty old building with rusting tools. But by night, it came alive with the glow of computer screens, the hum of machines, and the furious tapping of keyboards. Evelyn brought in two others she trusted: Malik, a hardware engineer, and Priya, a data scientist. Together, we became an EA, underground team, bound not by money, but by something far stronger, a shared desire to create something that mattered, and to see Crawford fall. I knew I couldn't simply launch the product and hope to compete. Crawford had too much reach. If I wanted revenge, I had to hit him where it hurt most: his pride, his reputation, and his empire. Step 1. Perfect the design Crawford had stolen. Ours would be faster, more scalable, and far more efficient. Step 2. Find the one competitor Crawford feared most, the one company he had never been able to crush. If I could get them on board, Crawford's empire would tremble. Step 3. Reveal everything at the perfect moment in a way that would not only expose Crawford, but humiliate him publicly, the same way he had humiliated me. But revenge wasn't just about building something better. It was about proving Crawford was a fraud. I started digging, late nights, hacking through layers of corporate paperwork, piecing together evidence of how he had stolen my idea. Emails, timestamps, leaked drafts. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Crawford had rushed to present my concept as his own, but in his haste, he had left a trail that led directly back to me. One night, Evelyn looked up from her laptop and said, "Daniel, if this goes public, it won't just hurt him. It'll destroy him." I stared at the screen, at the evidence glowing before us, and whispered, "Good." Back at home, my silence made Nadia suspicious. She'd watch me come in late at night, grease on my hands, exhaustion in my eyes. One evening, she cornered me, in the kitchen. "What are you up to, Daniel?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Nothing you'd understand," I muttered, pouring myself a glass of water. She stepped closer, narrowing her eyes. "You think you can beat Crawford, don't you? You're delusional. He's a giant. You're a nobody." I met her gaze steady this time. "Even giants can fall, Nadia," she laughed, shaking her head. "You're pathetic. Always will be." I didn't flinch, not anymore. Because for the first time, I knew something she didn't. The storm was coming. As weeks turned into months, our prototype took shape. Evelyn's algorithms hummed flawlessly. Malik's hardware was sleek and efficient. Priya's data models predicted outcomes Crawford's team couldn't dream of. For the first time since that fateful boardroom humiliation, I felt alive again. Not just alive, powerful. One night, as I stood in the garage watching the prototype run smoothly for the first time, I whispered to myself, "This is it. This is how I'll burn him to the ground." But the real turning point came not from the machine, but from a message, an email, brief and unexpected, from a company whose name made my pulse race. Helios Energy. Helios, Crawford's fiercest rival. The one company that had survived every attempt he made to buy them out, sabotage them, or bury them. The message read, "Mr. Malik, we've heard whispers of your work. If you're open to discussion, we'd like to meet. Confidentially." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. This was it. The door had opened, the chance I'd been waiting for, but I knew I had to be careful. One wrong step, and Crawford would crush me again. I closed my laptop, my reflection staring back at me in the darkened screen. "This is the beginning of the end, Crawford," I whispered, and for the first time, I smiled. The message from Helios Energy sat in my inbox like a ticking time bomb. I read it a dozen times, each word sinking deeper into my chest. "We've heard whispers of your work." Whispers. That meant our secret project had stirred the air, just enough to reach the ears of Crawford's greatest rival. I knew the risks. If I met with them and they betrayed me, Crawford would know instantly. But if I ignored it, the opportunity of a lifetime would slip away. I couldn't risk silence. I replied, "Yes, I'm open to a meeting, but it must remain confidential. No leaks." The next morning, their reply came swiftly. "Tomorrow. 9 p.m. Private. Location. Details attached." The place was nothing like I expected. Not a glass skyscraper or a boardroom. It was a private office in the back of a warehouse, tucked away from the city's lights. When I walked in, 3 people sat waiting. 2 executives and a man I recognized instantly. Adrian Cole, CEO of Helios Energy. Cole stood, shaking my hand firmly. His eyes were sharp, calculating, but not cruel like Crawford's. "Daniel Malik," he said. "I've been curious about you. Sit." I sat across from him, my palms sweating. "We've heard rumors," he began, "that you were the mind behind the adaptive energy proposal Crawford has been parading as his own." I stayed silent. He smirked. "Don't bother denying it. We know. We've done our digging. And frankly, his numbers don't add up. It feels incomplete." I leaned forward. "That's because it is incomplete. What he's using is a hollow version of my design. I have the original, fully realized, scalable, efficient, the real deal." Cole studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Good. That's what I was hoping you'd say." The next hour blurred into details, questions, and cautious answers. Cole wasn't interested in vague promises. He wanted proof. Bring us the prototype, he said finally. Show us it works, and Helios will back you. Not with 3 million, not even with 30. We'll go bigger, much bigger, enough to bury Crawford. My heart pounded. This was it. The chance to turn humiliation into triumph. But Cole wasn't finished. One condition, he said, his voice dropping. If we do this, it won't just be business, it'll be war. Crawford will come after you with everything he has. Are you ready for that? I thought of the laughter in that boardroom, of Nadia's smug face, of the word pathetic echoing in my skull. I met Cole's gaze. I've been ready since the day he humiliated me. Back in the garage, I told Evelyn, Malik, and Priya everything. Evelyn's eyes widened. Helios, Daniel, this is huge. It's bigger than huge, I said. If they back us, Crawford's empire will crack. Malik grinned. Then let's make sure this prototype is bulletproof. For the next 2 weeks, we worked like maniacs. Testing, refining, breaking things down just to rebuild them stronger. Every glitch was fixed, every weakness sealed. Finally, we had something worthy. The real adaptive solution, the one Crawford could never replicate. We packed the prototype into secure cases and drove it to Helios headquarters. Not the flashy towers the world knew, but a quiet testing facility outside the city. There, in front of Adrian Cole himself, we powered it on. The system hummed to life, numbers flowing across the screen, efficiency rates climbing higher and higher. Cole watched silently, then leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This, he said softly, changes everything. Within days, the contract was signed, not 3 million, not 30, but 100 million in backing, with more to come. Helios didn't just want to support me, they wanted to weaponize me, to use my design as the sword that would finally pierce Crawford's armor, and I was ready to wield it. We moved our operations into a secure Helios facility. My team grew overnight, dozens of engineers and specialists rallying behind the vision. For the first time, I felt what it was like to have real power, but I didn't forget why I was there. Every step forward was a step toward revenge. It didn't take long for Crawford to notice. A week later, headlines appeared. Helios partners with rising innovator. Secret project threatens Crawford's market dominance. Though they didn't name me directly, insiders whispered. And those whispers reached Crawford. I knew because Nadia barged into my room one evening, her face pale. Daniel, she hissed. What are you doing? I looked up from my laptop calmly. Working. Don't play dumb. Crawford called me. He said you're meddling in things you don't understand. He told me to warn you. If you cross him, you'll regret. I smiled faintly. Tell him I look forward to it. Her jaw dropped. You're insane. He'll destroy you. I met her eyes, steady. He already tried, and he failed. For the first time, she had no comeback. Crawford's arrogance was his weakness. He believed he could crush anyone, anytime. So when news of Helios's new project leaked further, he couldn't resist making a move. At a public event, he scoffed into the microphone. Helios can throw money at whatever dreamer they want. But without me, adaptive energy is a fantasy. I created this. No one else. The audience clapped, eating up his lies. But behind the scenes, Helios and I were preparing the counterstrike. We scheduled a massive unveiling, a live demonstration of the real adaptive system, broadcast to investors, governments, and the public. Cole's words still ring in my ears. When we show the world this, Crawford won't just lose business. He'll lose credibility. And that's fatal. The night before the unveiling, I stood alone in the garage, the place where it all began. The machines were gone, the walls quiet now, but the ghosts of every humiliation lingered. The laughter, the insults, the betrayal. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Tomorrow, it ends." I could almost hear my father's voice in the silence. Ideas can move mountains, and I answered softly, "And tomorrow, this idea will bury him." The morning of the unveiling, the city buzzed with curiosity. Billboards announced it. Financial networks teased it. Whispers rippled through every corner of the energy sector. Helios. Energy was about to reveal something that could rewrite the future. I stood backstage at the grand auditorium, heart hammering like a war drum. The seats filled with investors, analysts, journalists, and government officials, the kind of audience Crawford usually commanded with a snap of his fingers. But today, their eyes weren't on him. They were waiting for me. Adrian Cole leaned close and murmured, "This is your show, Daniel. Own it." I nodded, stepping toward the blinding stage lights. The crowd hushed as my name was announced. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the innovator behind the Helios Adaptive Energy Initiative, Daniel Malik. Applause rolled through the hall like thunder. I swallowed the lump in my throat and began. 2 years ago, I stood in a boardroom and was told my proposal was worthless, that it was pathetic. The audience leaned in, sensing the weight in my voice. I was humiliated, laughed at, dismissed, but I refused to bury my idea because I knew, deep down, that it wasn't just a dream. It was the future. Gasps murmured through the crowd. They didn't know the backstory, but the sting of betrayal colored every word. Behind me, the massive screens lit up with live data. My team activated the prototype, and the numbers began to climb. Adaptive energy, I explained, my voice steady now, is the key to breaking free from wasteful systems. It doesn't just store energy. It evolves. It learns. It grows with demand. And what you see here, I gestured to the soaring efficiency graphs, is proof that it works. The lights dimmed, revealing the model city powered entirely by our system. Houses, factories, and vehicles all illuminated seamlessly, shifting between loads without a flicker. The audience gasped again, this time in awe. Cameras flashed. Investors whispered urgently to their aides. Then came the moment we had planned. I pressed a button, and Crawford's version of the system appeared on the screen. Weak, unstable, its flaws laid bare in real time. This, I said coldly, is what was passed off as innovation. Hollow, broken, stolen. A ripple of shock surged through the hall, and right on cue, the doors burst open. Crawford himself strode in, face red with fury, trailed by Nadia and 2 of his executives. He hadn't been invited, but of course, he couldn't stay away. Lies, he barked, his voice echoing. This fraud has stolen from me. I created adaptive energy. I own it. The audience turned, stunned by the outburst. Reporters raised their cameras, recording every word. I faced him calmly, microphone in hand. Funny. That's exactly what you told me when you threw my proposal in the trash. Do you remember, Crawford? You called it pathetic. Gasps, heads, swiveled between us like a tennis match. Crawford froze, realizing too late that his arrogance had walked him into my trap. I clicked another button. The screens filled with documents, emails, timestamps, drafts, proof that my design predated Crawford's so-called version. The audience erupted in whispers and shouts. Cole stepped forward, voice like steel. Ladies and gentlemen, Helios has verified every piece of this work. Daniel Malik is the true innovator. And starting today, Helios will fund his vision. Not with millions, but with billions. The applause was deafening. Crawford's face drained of color. He spun to Nadia. You knew about this? He hissed. Nadia stammered, her mask of arrogance cracking. I thought he was bluffing. You fool! Crawford roared, his voice breaking with rage. The cameras caught it all. Within minutes, news outlets blasted the story worldwide. Crawford exposed. Innovator humiliated, rises with rival. Adaptive energy belongs to Daniel Malik, stock. Tickers plummeted as Crawford's empire bled billions. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. And me? I stood on stage, the cheers washing over me like a tidal wave. For the first time, I wasn't the humiliated outcast. I was the man who turned betrayal into revolution. After the event, as the crowd swarmed, Crawford cornered me in the corridor. His eyes burned with hatred. You think this is over? He spat. You've ruined me, but I'll rebuild. I'll crush you, boy. I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. No, Crawford. This is the end. You tried to steal my future. Instead, I stole yours. From this day forward, every headline, every whisper, every failure you endure will remind you of one thing. You called me pathetic, and I proved you wrong. He trembled, fists clenched, but powerless. Security closed in, guiding him away, like a disgraced relic. Later that night, Nadia appeared at my door. Her eyes were red, mascara streaked down her face. "Daniel, please," she begged. "I didn't know it would go this far. I was just trying to impress him, to secure my place. But I see now. I was wrong. Can you forgive me?" For a moment, I saw the sister I once cared for. But then I remembered the smirk, the laughter, the way she called my dreams pathetic to my face. I shook my head. "Forgive you? Nadia, you chose your side, and now you can live with the consequences. Alone." Her face crumpled, and she turned, away sobbing into the night. That evening, I sat with Evelyn, Malik, and Priya, watching the news reports roll in. Every channel carried the same message. Crawford was finished. Helios had won. And I, the boy they had laughed at, the man they dismissed, was now the name on everyone's lips. Evelyn raised her glass. "To revenge," she said softly. I smiled. "No, to justice." But deep down, I knew it was both. Crawford's empire crumbled faster than even I had imagined. Within days of the unveiling, his stock value collapsed. Major investors pulled out, contracts dissolved. The board of directors, once loyal dogs, turned on him like wolves. Headlines painted his portrait in flames, Crawford the charlatan, billionaire caught passing off stolen work. Humiliation on the global stage. The man who once sneered at me as if I were dirt beneath his shoes was suddenly the laughingstock of the industry. I watched from my office at Helios as live. Footage played of Crawford being forced out of his headquarters. Cameras swarmed, journalists shouted questions, and security escorted him through the lobby he once ruled. One reporter called out, "Mr. Crawford, is it true you called Daniel Malik's proposal pathetic?" Crawford snarled, but his voice cracked. "Twisted lies, he tricked everyone." But his words were drowned by jeers. The world wasn't buying his story anymore. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment wash over me. For years, I had dreamed of seeing him humbled. Now, reality exceeded every fantasy. Nadia disappeared from the public eye. No more smug photos on yachts, no more lavish parties. I later learned she tried to distance herself from Crawford, claiming she had been misled. But the truth was recorded. Her laughter in that boardroom, her cruel words, her alliance with him. Industry circles whispered her name with contempt. No one wanted her on their boards. No one trusted her. Once, she mocked me as the forgotten brother. Now, she was the forgotten sister. Meanwhile, my life transformed. Helios placed me at the head of the Adaptive Energy Initiative. My team expanded into hundreds of engineers, researchers, and visionaries. My garage workshop was replaced by state-of-the-art labs and innovation centers. Investors lined up at our doors. Governments called, eager to adopt our systems. My design wasn't just a product now, it was a movement. And everywhere I went, the same phrase followed me. The man Crawford rejected. It became a badge of honor, proof that humiliation can be fuel for greatness. Sometimes, late at night, Evelyn would sit with me in our new apartment overlooking the skyline. She'd pour 2 glasses of wine, and we'd talk quietly, away from the noise of the world. "You've changed," she said one evening, her eyes soft but searching. "How so?" I asked. "You're stronger, more confident. But there's a hardness now, too. Like part of you never left that boardroom." I thought about it, staring at the glittering city lights. Maybe you're right. Maybe part of me will always be there, standing in front of him, being laughed at. "Does it still hurt?" she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No, not anymore. Now it drives me." She reached across the table, taking my hand. "Then let it drive you forward, Daniel. Not back." Her words stayed with me. Revenge had given me power, but Evelyn reminded me not to let it consume me. Months later, Crawford tried to claw his way back. He launched a desperate lawsuit, claiming Helios had stolen his intellectual property, but in court, the evidence destroyed him. Emails, drafts, testimonies, everything pointed to me as the originator. The judge dismissed his case with prejudice, calling it a disgraceful waste of the court's time. Crawford stormed out, humiliated once more. Each attempt to rebuild ended the same. Investors wouldn't touch him. Partners fled. His fortune shrank. He was no longer the untouchable titan. He was a relic, remembered only for his downfall. One evening I received a letter. Not an email, not a legal notice. A handwritten letter, trembling with desperation. It was from Crawford. Daniel, you've taken everything from me. My company. My reputation, my life's work. Wasn't humiliating me once enough? Do you intend to see me ruined completely? I read it twice, then set it aside. I didn't respond, because he still didn't understand. I hadn't ruined him. He had ruined himself, the moment he mocked me instead of believing in me. Months later, Nadia appeared again, not glamorous, not proud, but broken. She met me, in the Helios lobby, wearing simple clothes, her makeup smudged from tears. Daniel, she whispered, almost too softly to hear. I have nothing left. No one will hire me. No one trusts me. I don't even have Crawford anymore. Please, help me. For a moment, I felt a pang of the brotherly bond we once shared as children. But then her voice from the past echoed in my head. Pathetic. I shook my head. You laughed when I needed support. You stood beside him when he tore me down. You chose that path. Now walk it. Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. She turned and walked away, her figure small and fragile against the vast glass doors. I felt no joy in rejecting her, only closure. Late at night, I sometimes return to the memory of that boardroom. The sting of humiliation is gone now, replaced by a strange kind of gratitude. Because if Crawford hadn't called my proposal pathetic, if Nadia hadn't mocked me, maybe I would have given up. Maybe I would have buried my idea. Instead, they forged me. Their cruelty was the fire, and I became the steel. And now, every light powered by adaptive energy, every home, every car, every city, is proof of that transformation. One evening, standing together on the balcony, Evelyn whispered something that stayed with me forever. Daniel, revenge gave you justice. But what you built after, that's your true legacy. Don't ever forget it. I held her close, watching the city glow with the energy we had created. And in that moment, I realized she was right. The revenge was satisfying, but the future was mine. The weeks turned into months, and what began as a personal victory soon transformed into a global revolution. Adaptive energy wasn't just a product anymore. It became the standard. Nations signed agreements. Cities pledged transitions. Families felt the difference in their bills, their cars, their daily lives. And everywhere, one name was spoken with respect: Daniel Malik. I traveled from capital to capital, unveiling new projects, shaking hands with leaders who had once ignored my emails. They spoke of me not just as an innovator, but as a symbol of resilience. At a summit in Geneva, a minister leaned close after my presentation. You're proof, Mr. Malik, that genius cannot be silenced forever, even when mocked, even when betrayed. His words echoed in my mind long after the applause because he was right. I hadn't just built a system, I had built a story the world now believed in, and then there was Crawford. Everywhere I went, his name lingered like a cautionary tale. Journalists wrote exposés, investors gave speeches, professors lectured students about the downfall of arrogance. His name had become a synonym for failure. Don't pull a Crawford, they joked in business schools. I should have felt pity. But every time I remembered his laughter, the word pathetic dripping from his lips, that pity hardened back into resolve. Rumors spread about his new life. Some said he retreated to a private island, living in isolation. Others claimed they saw him at dingy bars, ranting about betrayal to anyone who would listen. One report said he tried to start a small consulting firm, but no one trusted him. Clients pulled out within weeks. For a man who once commanded empires, the fall was brutal, and yet fitting. Months later, I received an odd request. A university invited me to speak at a leadership seminar. They wanted me to tell my story, not just the science, but the journey. When I arrived, the hall was packed with students, eyes wide with curiosity. I told them about the humiliation, the betrayal, and the decision to fight back. At the end, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Malik, if you could go back to that boardroom, to that moment when they mocked you, what would you do differently?" I paused. The silence was heavy. Finally, I said, "Nothing." Because without that moment, I wouldn't be standing here today. Their cruelty was the soil where my determination grew. The applause was long and loud, and I realized then that my story was no longer mine alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough. That night, Evelyn and I walked along the quiet streets of the city. She looked at me with a gentle smile. "You've become a legend," she said softly. I chuckled. I never wanted to be a legend. I just wanted to be heard. "And now you are. But don't let the legend consume the man. Remember the boy who sat in his garage, dreaming of changing the world. That's who you are." Her words grounded me. Fame could inflate, success could blind, but Evelyn reminded me of my roots, of why I started. It was almost a year later when Nadia reached out again. Not to beg, not to scheme, but to apologize. She arrived quietly, no entourage, no pride left in her eyes. "Daniel," she whispered, "I've lost everything. Crawford is gone. The people I called friends vanished. And when I look back, I see myself laughing at you. I see myself choosing him over you. And I hate that version of me." Her voice cracked. "I don't expect forgiveness. I needed to say I'm sorry." For a long moment, I said nothing. Finally, I nodded. "I believe you. And I hope you rebuild your life. But Nadia, forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You'll still have to live with what you chose." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded too. And for the first time, she left not as an enemy, but as a broken soul trying to start again. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. Then came the final headline. Former CEO Crawford declares bankruptcy. The man who once measured his worth in billions now stood in court listing his assets. A few properties, some cars, scraps of a fallen empire. Reporters said he looked old, frail, a shadow of his former self. No longer feared, no longer admired. Just forgotten. When I saw the footage, I felt no joy, just a cold, poetic symmetry. He had called my dream worthless, and in the end, it was his empire that proved worthless. Meanwhile, adaptive energy spread across continents. Cities that, once drowned in pollution, breathed cleaner air. Villages once cut off from electricity lit up for the first time, and every flickering light carried a story. My story. The boy they mocked. The idea they dismissed. The man who turned humiliation into power. Sometimes late at night, I whisper the word Crawford used against me. Pathetic. But I whisper it with a smile. Because now, it doesn't hurt. It reminds me. It reminds me that one insult can either break you or build you. And I chose to build. The world praised me. Awards, interviews, recognition, it poured in like a flood. But when the lights dimmed, when the applause faded, I often found myself alone with my thoughts. And in the quiet, I asked the question no one else dared to. Had revenge made me stronger? Or had it changed me into something else? Some nights I lay awake replaying that boardroom moment. The sneers, the laughter, Crawford's voice like venom. Pathetic. But the memory felt different now. Less like a wound, more like a scar. A reminder of where I had come from, but also of the fire I had chosen to feed. Because revenge, I realized, was intoxicating. Each victory against Crawford gave me a rush. Each headline about his downfall felt like justice, but also like fuel. Had I become addicted to that fire? Evelyn noticed before I did. One evening, as I scanned yet another news article about Crawford's bankruptcy, she touched my hand. "Daniel," she said softly, "you don't need to watch him crumble anymore. You've already won." "I know," I murmured. "But I can't look away. Every time I see him fall, I feel..." "Vindicated?" she finished. I nodded. She squeezed my hand. "Vindication is a dangerous drug. Don't let it replace your purpose." Her words sank deep. Because she was right. My purpose had never been to destroy him. My purpose had been to build, to create, to prove that my idea could change lives. Somewhere, along the line, I had blurred those two paths. Malik, ever the realist, gave me his version. "Brother," he said one night over dinner, "revenge is like fire. It'll warm you, light your way, but hold it too long, and it'll burn your hands." I chuckled. "You sound like Dad." "Maybe," he said, grinning, "but you need to hear it. Crawford's ashes aren't your responsibility anymore. The future is." I stared into my glass, hearing both Evelyn's and Malik's words echo in my head. One weekend, I returned to the garage where it all began. The place was dusty, the machines long gone, but the spirit lingered. I walked the cracked floor, touching the old workbench, remembering the late nights of trial and error, the frustration, the hope. Here, I wasn't a global figure. I wasn't a CEO or a headline. I was just Daniel, a dreamer with a stubborn idea. And standing there, I realized something. Revenge had fueled me, yes. But it wasn't revenge that built adaptive energy. It was resilience. It was vision. It was refusing to give up when others mocked me. That was the core I had to hold on to. In speeches, people often asked me, "What did it feel like to see Crawford fall?" I usually gave a polished answer, something about justice or perseverance. But the truth was heavier. It felt powerful. Too powerful. Because once you taste the sweetness of revenge, it tempts you to seek it again, even when it's not needed. I had to remind myself, revenge wasn't my purpose. Change was. Innovation was. If I let revenge define me, I'd be no better than Crawford. Even Nadia's broken apologies haunted me. I replayed her tearful words, wondering if I had been too harsh. Part of me wanted to forgive her fully, to let her back into my life. Another part whispered, she chose her side when it mattered most. The conflict gnawed at me, because family, no matter how fractured, leaves marks deeper than business ever could. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let bitterness define my relationship with her forever. If I did, then Crawford's poison would still be inside me. Months later, I was invited to deliver the keynote at a global summit on sustainable innovation. Standing before thousands, I told my story. But this time, I left Crawford out. I didn't speak of betrayal or revenge. I spoke of resilience, collaboration, vision, and when I finished, the applause was just as thunderous as ever. That night, Evelyn said, "Do you see? They admire you not because you destroyed someone, but because you created something." Her words lit a spark in me. She was right. Revenge had opened the door, but creation was what kept it open. So I made a choice. I stopped following news of Crawford, stopped counting his losses, stopped measuring my success by his failure. Instead, I poured myself into the work, into expanding adaptive energy, into mentoring young innovators, into proving that ideas can outlive humiliation. And slowly, the hunger for revenge quieted. It didn't vanish. Scars never vanish. But it no longer ruled me. One evening, I returned to the summit stage where it had all begun, the unveiling that destroyed Crawford. The hall was empty now, the lights dimmed, but I stood there and whispered to the ghost of that moment, "You were wrong. I wasn't pathetic. I was just unfinished." And in the silence, I felt peace, because revenge had ended long ago. What remained now was legacy. That night, as we stood on the balcony, Evelyn asked, "Daniel, If Crawford walked up to you tomorrow and begged for forgiveness, would you give it? I thought for a long time. Then I said quietly, I don't need to forgive him. I just need to outlive him, and I already have. She smiled sadly, kissed my cheek, and whispered, then maybe that's forgiveness in its own way. In the end, revenge was not the destination. It was the road I walked to find my strength. And though the road was bitter, though it cut my feet and scarred my soul, it led me here, to a future brighter than I ever imagined, and that I realized was the true victory. The story of revenge ends, but the story of life never does. As I look back now, years after Crawford's fall, the events play like an old film reel, vivid yet distant. His voice calling my proposal pathetic, the boardroom's laughter, the anger, the fire, the need to prove him wrong. It all feels like another lifetime. Because now when I stand before new faces, I don't tell them about Crawford. I tell them about resilience, about the beauty of holding on to a vision when the world calls you foolish, about building something not to spite others but to honor yourself. The stage is different now. It isn't lit by cold spotlights or filled with investors waiting to sneer. It's filled with students, dreamers, people who remind me of myself. In that dusty garage, they don't carry billions in their pockets, but they carry something worth more: hope. And when I look into their eyes, I know my story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who's ever been told, you're not enough, because the truth is, enough is never given. It's forged. Sometimes they ask me about him. What happened to the man who rejected you? I tell them only this. He taught me what kind of man I'd never want to become, because that's his only place in my story now. A cautionary shadow, not a living presence. He's the echo that pushed me forward, but he no longer defines me. And perhaps that's the ultimate revenge. To strip him of power not by destroying him further, but by no longer needing him at all. One day a letter arrived, from Nadia. Her handwriting was shaky, her words uncertain. Daniel, I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you know I regret everything. Crawford manipulated me, yes, but I let myself be manipulated. I traded loyalty for fear, and I lost a brother. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. For a long while, I didn't know how to feel. But eventually, I wrote back. Only one line. I don't hate you anymore. That's enough. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't warmth. But it was a beginning. And for me, that was closure. Evelyn, ever my compass, once told me, Daniel, revenge is like a storm. It clears the skies, but you don't live in the storm. You live in the calm afterward. I see that now. The calm is where love thrives, where vision grows, where children are raised, and where legacies take root. The storm was necessary, but the calm is what makes it all worth it. Years later, I visited one of our plants overseas. A young engineer walked up to me, nervous, holding a notebook full of sketches. Sir, he said, I have an idea. People think it's impossible, but I believe it can work. I smiled, seeing my younger self in his eyes, and I said the words I wish I had heard back then. Don't ever let anyone tell you it's pathetic. Show them it's possible. His face lit up, and in that moment, I knew. The torch had passed. My revenge story had transformed into something larger, something eternal, inspiration. When I'm gone, I know people won't remember me for destroying Crawford. They'll remember me for the doors I opened, the energy I unleashed, the lives that changed because one man refused to bow to humiliation. That's the true victory. Not the storm, but the seeds it allowed me to plant after. I began this journey with anger burning in my chest, humiliation in my veins, and the word pathetic echoing in my ears. Now I end it with peace, with love, with a legacy far beyond revenge, and when I tell this story, not of Crawford, not of humiliation, but of resilience, I say this to anyone listening. Your worth is not defined by the voices that doubt you. Your power is not measured by the ones who laugh at you. Your destiny is not decided by those who reject you. It is forged in the quiet, stubborn fire of your own belief. So when the world calls you pathetic, smile. Because one day, you'll turn that word into the foundation of your empire. And that will be the sweetest revenge of all.